Eli Turner had always believed that life rewarded those who carried the most. The busiest schedules, the longest to-do lists, the heaviest responsibilities. In the small town where he grew up, people admired anyone who looked exhausted. Tired meant hardworking. Busy meant important. Rest meant lazy. So Eli, from a young age, learned to fill every corner of his life with something he could point to and say, "See, I'm doing a lot. I matter." By the time he reached adulthood, the pattern had grown into a lifestyle. His apartment was crowded with things he never used, but somehow felt he needed. His calendar was packed with commitments he didn't enjoy but didn't know how to decline. His mind was a constant storm of noise. Ideas, worries, and unfinished thoughts. He slept lightly, woke early, and moved through each day like someone trying to hold 11 grocery bags with 2 hands. Somehow he always felt one breath away from dropping everything. One morning, while rushing to work with a half-buttoned shirt and a coffee cup that felt too hot to hold, Eli slipped on the wet pavement outside his apartment. His coffee flew out of his hand, landed on his shoes, and soaked his pants. Cars honked behind him as he crouched in the middle of the parking lot, picking up what was left of his breakfast. In the chaos of that moment, something inside him paused. It wasn't anger. It wasn't embarrassment. It was something heavier. Something tired. A voice from deep inside the part of him he never listened to anymore whispered, "This isn't a life. This is a treadmill you keep running on even though it's going nowhere." He stood there, dripping and irritated, and for the first time in years, he didn't rush. He didn't run upstairs to change. He just looked around. The world felt strangely quiet. The morning sun rose between 2 buildings, casting a soft yellow glow over the lot. A neighbor he'd never spoken to walked past him with a gentle wave. A bird perched on a rusted street sign and began to sing. Eli realized he hadn't heard birds in weeks, maybe months. Not because they weren't there, but because he was always drowning in his own noise. That moment stayed with him all day. Long after his clothes dried and the embarrassment faded, he kept thinking about how it felt to simply stop moving. It was as if his mind had been begging him for space, and he finally gave it one small breath of air. That night, Eli sat in his apartment and looked around. The room felt crowded, not just with furniture and boxes, but with the weight of his own life. The TV hummed in the background, a show he wasn't even watching. His phone buzzed with messages he didn't want to answer. His laptop sat open on a dozen tabs, each one reminding him of unfinished tasks. For the first time, he asked himself a question he had avoided since childhood. Why is my life so complicated? The question lingered in the air. He couldn't blame anyone else. He couldn't point to circumstances or people. He knew the truth. He had built this life because he believed a complicated life meant a meaningful one. But now, sitting in the middle of a room that felt too full and a mind that felt even fuller, he began to wonder if simplicity might be the thing he had been craving all along. He didn't change everything overnight. That wasn't how people transformed. Instead, he started with something small. One evening, he turned off the TV by choice and listened to the silence. It felt strange at first, like walking into an abandoned building. But after a while, his heart settled. He found comfort in the quiet. The next day, he left work at a normal hour, something he rarely allowed himself to do. He drove home without the radio, letting his thoughts untangle themselves. He made dinner slowly, paying attention to the smells, the sounds, the rhythm of cooking. When he finished, he ate at his table instead of hunched over the laptop. It wasn't a perfect meal, and it wasn't fancy, but he tasted every bite. He couldn't remember the last time he had done that. That weekend, he cleaned the corner of his apartment that had gathered dust for years. It wasn't a full reset, but it was a beginning. As he sorted through old boxes, he found things he didn't even remember owning. The more he let go of, the lighter he felt. Each item he released seemed to take a small piece of stress with it. It was the first time he realized that less didn't mean losing. It meant breathing, but simplifying a life wasn't just about physical things. It was about the weight he carried inside. Eli began to notice how often he said yes to things he didn't want. Co-workers asked him to cover shifts. Friends expected him to attend events. People relied on him for favors. And every time he agreed, he carried a little more exhaustion. One day, his friend Mark invited him to another weekend outing. Usually, Eli would have said yes before Mark even finished the sentence. But this time, he paused. His heart felt heavy at the thought of another obligation. So he took a breath and said something he had never said before, "I think I need a quiet weekend to myself." Mark blinked in surprise. "You? Since when?" Eli laughed softly. "Since now, I guess." It felt uncomfortable to set that boundary. But afterward, he felt a calmness he couldn't describe. It was like the first warm breeze after a long winter. His journey toward simplicity wasn't quick or easy. There were days when he slipped back into old habits, filling his schedule with things that didn't matter. Some nights, he still drowned in overthinking. But each time he remembered that parking lot morning, where everything stopped and the world suddenly made sense. He guided himself back. One evening, months later, Eli found himself walking through a quiet park on the edge of town. The sun was lowering itself behind a cluster of trees, painting the sky in soft oranges and pinks. Children played on swings while parents watched from nearby benches. A dog chased its own tail in circles. Couples strolled, hands intertwined, sharing a peace that Eli had begun to recognize in himself. He sat on a wooden bench and let time slow down. The air smelled like cut grass and warm earth. A soft breeze brushed his face. For the first time in as long as he could remember, Eli didn't feel rushed. He didn't feel behind. He didn't feel like he needed to be anywhere else. He felt present. An older man sat down beside him, holding a small bag of peanuts. He tossed a few on the ground, and a pair of squirrels scampered over. Eli smiled. "They come here every day," the man said. "They like the simple things." Eli nodded. "I'm trying to learn that." The man chuckled. "Takes time. But once you figure it out, you'll wonder why you ever lived any other way." As the man fed the squirrels, Eli realized something profound. Life didn't need to be complicated to be meaningful. Meaning came from presence, from clarity, from choosing what truly mattered. It came from letting go of noise so the heart could speak. His job didn't suddenly change. His responsibilities didn't vanish. The world didn't become easier. But Eli became lighter. And that made all the difference. He began waking up earlier, not because he had to, but because he genuinely enjoyed the feeling of morning sunlight spilling through his windows. He learned to cook meals that made him happy instead of grabbing whatever was fastest. He picked up old hobbies he once loved but abandoned in the rush of adulthood. He read books in silence, letting the stories fill the spaces where stress used to live. Even his relationships began to shift. He spent more time with people who made him feel grounded and less time with those who drained him. He spoke more honestly, listened more deeply, and connected more meaningfully. He discovered that simplifying his life didn't push people away, it attracted the right ones closer. One afternoon, he visited his parents' home for the first time in months. His mother noticed the change instantly. "You look peaceful," she said, touching his cheek with a softness she had always carried. "I feel peaceful," he replied. His father leaned back in his chair. "What did you do? Win the lottery?" Eli laughed. "In a way, I think I did. Just not the kind you're thinking of." Later that night, while driving home under a sky filled with stars, Eli thought about how far he had come. His life used to feel like a tightly knotted rope. Now it felt like a gentle stream, flowing steadily toward somewhere calm and beautiful. He had begun his journey with a simple belief that the world respected people who lived complicated lives. But now he understood something far deeper. Simplicity wasn't weakness. It was mastery. It was not the absence of responsibility, but the presence of intention. It was choosing what mattered and letting the rest drift away like leaves on the surface of a river. Months turned into seasons, and Eli grew into a version of himself he never imagined he could be. A version who no longer rushed through life but walked through it with purpose. A version who smiled more, worried less, and found joy in moments so small they once seemed invisible. One crisp autumn morning, Eli walked back through the same parking lot where everything had shifted. The memory hit him like a soft breeze. He could almost see his past self crouching on the pavement, holding scattered coffee cups and trying to hold together a life that was too heavy. He whispered softly to that memory, "Thank you." Because that moment of chaos had become the doorway to simplicity. A reminder that sometimes life cracks open not to break you, but to let light in, and in that light, Eli found clarity, he found himself, he found the beauty of a simple life. And wherever you are, however your days feel right now, remember this: simplicity isn't something distant or impossible. It's waiting inside you, quietly, patiently, ready to rise the moment you give yourself permission to stop carrying what was never meant for your hands. Eli's story is only one example. Yours can be different, gentler, faster, slower, deeper, or more colorful. But the path is always there, the path that leads you back to peace, and if this story lit even a small spark of inspiration in you, keep it alive. Keep it warm. Let it guide you toward a life that feels lighter, clearer, and beautifully simple. I share stories like this every day. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one.